I never thought I would be the villain in someone else's story. We never do we? We walk through our lives convinced that our reasons are valid, that our choices are justified, that the harm we cause is somehow lesser than the harm we fear receiving. I told myself that life was 7 years. 7 years of smiling at my best friend across dinner tables. 7 years of hugging her at birthday parties. 7 years of looking into the eyes of a woman who trusted me with her soul and knowing that I had betrayed her in ways she could not even imagine. My name is Megan Hayes. I am 34 years old, and this is my confession. This is the story of how I cheated my best friend, how I kept that secret buried deep in the darkest part of my heart, and how the truth eventually clawed its way into the light in the most devastating way possible. Sophie Brennan was my person. That is the only way I can describe what she meant to me. We met on the first day of university, both of us nervous freshers standing in line at the campus coffee shop, both of us reaching for the last blueberry muffin on the display shelf. She laughed and told me to take it. I insisted she should have it. We ended up splitting it at a table by the window, and by the time we finished that muffin, I knew I had found someone who felt like home. Sophie was everything I was not. She was warm where I was guarded. She was trusting where I was suspicious. She was creative and free-spirited while I was analytical and controlled. People always said we balanced each other out, and I suppose we did. She made me softer. I made her sharper. Together, we were unstoppable. At least, that is what I believed. We went through everything together. Failed exams, broken hearts, terrible jobs, family dramas. When my father passed away during our 3rd year of university, Sophie did not leave my side for 2 weeks. She slept on my floor, made me eat when I forgot, held me when I cried at 3 in the morning. When her parents went through their brutal divorce the following year, I did the same for her. We were sisters in every way except blood. We promised each other that nothing would ever come between us. I meant that promise when I made it. I truly did. But promises, I have learned, are easy to make when you have never been tested. It is when life presents you with a choice between loyalty and desire that you discover who you really are. And when my moment of testing came, I discovered that I was not the person I thought I was. I was not even close. The betrayal did not happen in a single moment. That is something people do not understand about deception. It is not one choice. It is 1,000 small choices, each one taking you further down a path you never intended to walk. The first choice happened 3 years after we graduated, when Sophie and I were both working in marketing at different firms in London. Sophie had always been the creative one. She had this brilliant mind that could see connections others missed, could craft narratives that made people feel something real. I was good at execution, at strategy, at climbing the ladder. But ideas, true innovation, that was Sophie's gift, not mine. We used to stay up late at her flat, drinking cheap wine and brainstorming concepts for campaigns we would create someday when we had our own agency. That was our dream, you see. Hayes and Brennan Creative. We even had a logo designed on a napkin. We were going to build something together, something that would last. One night, Sophie told me about an idea she had been developing. It was brilliant. Even now, knowing everything that happened, I cannot deny that it was the most innovative marketing concept I had ever heard. She called it emotional mapping. The idea was to create a system that tracked the emotional journey of consumers through a brand experience using subtle cues and feedback mechanisms to personalize messaging in real time. This was before such technology became mainstream. Sophie was years ahead of her time. She showed me her notes, her research, her preliminary designs. She trusted me with her vision because that is who Sophie was. She trusted completely, loved completely, gave completely. And I sat there in her living room listening to her passion, looking at her brilliance laid bare on pages of handwritten notes, and something dark twisted inside me. I wanted it. Not to share it with her. I wanted it for myself. I told myself I would never act on that feeling. I told myself it was just a passing thought, a momentary weakness, but the seed had been planted, and over the following weeks it began to grow. I started taking mental notes of everything Sophie told me about emotional mapping. I remembered every detail, every nuance, every aspect of the concept that made it special. Sophie was so open with me. She had no filter, no protection against someone who might want to steal from her. She never imagined that the person sitting across from her, nodding and encouraging and asking questions, was memorizing her ideas with the intention of claiming them as her own. I hated myself for what I was thinking, but I did not stop. I could not stop. The ambition that my mother had cultivated in me since childhood was too powerful. The voice in my head that said I would never be good enough, that said I needed to prove myself at any cost, that voice drowned out everything else. My mother was a significant factor in what I became. Olivia Hayes raised me to believe that winning was the only thing that mattered. After my father died, she became even more obsessed with status and success. She saw Sophie as a threat, not a friend. She would make subtle comments about how Sophie was holding me back, how Sophie's lack of ambition would drag me down, how I needed to surround myself with people who could elevate me rather than people who needed me. I should have pushed back against those words. I should have defended my friend. But my mother had a way of getting inside my head, of making me doubt everything I thought I knew. And when the opportunity came to advance my career in a way I never thought possible, my mother's voice was the one I listened to. It happened at a conference 6 months after Sophie first told me about emotional mapping. I was there representing my company, networking, trying to make connections that might lead to a promotion. I met a senior executive from Hartwell and Associates, one of the biggest marketing firms in the country. His name was Gregory Hartwell himself, the founder and CEO. He was looking for fresh ideas, new approaches, something that would differentiate his firm in an increasingly crowded market. We got talking over drinks, and before I knew what I was doing, I was telling him about emotional mapping. Not as Sophie's idea, as my own. I can still remember the exact moment I made that choice. I can still see Gregory's face lighting up with interest, can still hear myself describing concepts that had come from Sophie's brilliant mind as though they had emerged from mine. I crossed a line that night from which there was no return. And the worst part? It felt good. It felt powerful. For the first time in my life, I was the one with the brilliant idea. I was the one being sought after. I was the one who mattered. Gregory offered me a position at Hartwell and Associates that same night, a senior role with a salary that made my head spin. He wanted me to lead the development of this emotional mapping concept, to build a team, to create something revolutionary. I accepted without hesitation. I told myself that Sophie would never know. She was working at a small firm with no connection to the corporate world I was entering. Her idea would have died in obscurity anyway, I reasoned. I was giving it life. I was making it real. That is what I told myself to sleep at night. That is the lie I whispered to my reflection in the mirror every morning. But lies, even the ones we tell ourselves most convincingly, have a way of festering. They rot something inside you, something essential, something you do not realize you have lost until it is far too late. I started my new position at Hartwell and Associates with an enthusiasm that bordered on manic. I threw myself into developing the concept that was not mine, refining it, building the infrastructure to bring it to market. I was careful to change enough details that Sophie would not immediately recognize her own idea if she ever encountered it. I added my own touches, my own strategic elements. But the core, the essence, the revolutionary heart of the concept remained Sophie's creation. I was building my career on stolen genius, and with every success, I felt the weight of that theft pressing down on me more heavily. I started avoiding Sophie's calls. I told her I was busy with the new job, which was true. But the real reason I could not face her was that I could not look into her trusting eyes and pretend that everything was normal. I could not listen to her talk about her own career struggles, about how she felt stuck and unfulfilled, without wanting to scream the truth at her. The friend I loved and the ambition that drove me were at war, and ambition was winning. 6 months into my new position, something happened that complicated everything exponentially. Sophie called me one evening, her voice bright with excitement. She had met someone, she told me, a man who made her feel things she had never felt before. His name was Daniel Porter, and he was the founder of a tech startup that was doing innovative things in the consumer behavior space. They had met at a networking event, and Sophie was convinced he was the one. She wanted me to meet him, to give my approval, to share in her happiness. I agreed to dinner with them the following week, expecting to meet some forgettable entrepreneur who would be out of Sophie's life within a month. What I found instead was the man who would become the second act in my betrayal. Daniel Porter was not what I expected. He was charming in a way that felt effortless, intelligent in a way that was genuinely attractive, and ambitious in a way that mirrored something deep inside me. He asked thoughtful questions, listened with genuine interest, and made both Sophie and me feel like we were the most fascinating people in the room. Sophie was radiant beside him, more alive than I had seen her in years. She deserved this happiness. She deserved a man who would love her the way she loved him. But as the evening went on, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Daniel's eyes kept finding mine across the table. His attention lingered on me a beat too long. When Sophie left to use the restroom, he leaned in and made a comment about how lucky he was that Sophie had such a beautiful and brilliant friend. The way he said it was not innocent. It was loaded with subtext, with invitation, with possibility. I should have shut it down right there. I should have made clear that I would never cross that line with my best friend's partner, but I did not. I let the moment hang in the air. I met his eyes and held his gaze, and something unspoken passed between us that would eventually destroy everything. Nothing happened that night, or the next time I saw Daniel, or the time after that, but the tension between us grew with every encounter. He found excuses to contact me, to ask for my advice on his business, to meet for coffee to discuss marketing strategies for his startup. I told myself these meetings were innocent. I told myself I was just being a good friend to Sophie by helping her boyfriend succeed. But I knew what I was really doing. I was laying the groundwork for something I could not admit I wanted. Daniel made me feel seen in a way I had never experienced. He treated me like I was exceptional, like I was the most interesting woman he had ever met. And after years of feeling like I was never quite good enough, never quite smart enough, never quite worthy enough, his attention was intoxicating. Sophie trusted me completely. She encouraged my friendship with Daniel, thrilled that the two most important people in her life got along so well. She had no idea that every time she left us alone together, the air crackled with an electricity that was building toward an inevitable explosion. The first time Daniel kissed me was 11 months after I met him. Sophie was away at a conference for work, and Daniel invited me to dinner to discuss a marketing opportunity for his company. I told myself that was the only reason I agreed to go. I told myself I was in control of the situation, but when he walked me to my door at the end of the night, when he looked at me with those eyes that promised things I had only imagined, when he leaned in and pressed his lips to mine, I did not pull away. I kissed him back. I kissed him like I had been waiting to kiss him for months, which I had been. I kissed him knowing that my best friend loved him, that she was planning a future with him, that she trusted me with her heart, and I was shattering that trust with every second that passed. When the kiss ended, I felt something inside me break. Not in the dramatic way you might expect. It was quieter than that. It was a small, essential piece of my integrity that simply ceased to exist. And once it was gone, everything that came after became possible. The affair lasted 2 years. 2 years of secret meetings, whispered phone calls, lies piled upon lies, until I could barely remember what the truth looked like. Daniel was skilled at deception, I learned. He compartmentalized his life with terrifying efficiency, showing up for Sophie as the devoted boyfriend, while simultaneously pursuing me with an intensity that made me feel like the center of his universe. I knew I was not special. I knew that a man who could lie so easily to the woman he claimed to love could lie just as easily to me. But knowing something and accepting it are different things. I clung to the belief that what we had was real, that Daniel would eventually choose me, that somehow this betrayal would lead to a love story rather than a tragedy. Sophie remained oblivious. She and Daniel got engaged after 2 years of dating, and she asked me to be her maid of honor. I stood beside her as she tried on wedding dresses, offering opinions, sharing in her joy, all while knowing that I had been intimate with her fiancé just days before. The duplicity of that moment still haunts me. The smile I forced onto my face as Sophie twirled in white lace, the congratulations I offered, the toasts I made to their happiness. I was a monster wearing the mask of a best friend, and no one suspected a thing. The universe has a way of balancing its books, though. Karma does not always strike swiftly, but it never forgets. My professional life, which had seemed so golden, began to show cracks. The emotional mapping concept I had stolen was a massive success. Hartwell and Associates was transformed by it, and I was credited as the visionary who had made it all possible. I received promotions, bonuses, industry recognition. My mother was prouder of me than she had ever been. But success built on a stolen foundation is never stable. Somewhere out there, the truth was waiting to emerge, and it started with a simple coincidence that set a chain of events in motion that I could not control. Sophie's brother, James, had always been wary of me. Where Sophie saw only my best qualities, James seemed to sense something darker beneath the surface. He was an investment banker with a sharp mind and sharper instincts. During a family dinner at Sophie's flat, James mentioned that he had been researching innovative marketing concepts for one of his clients. He brought up emotional mapping, not knowing that I had any connection to it. Sophie's face lit up when she heard the term. She started explaining the concept excitedly, adding her own insights, building on ideas in real time. James looked at her with surprise, then looked at me. I felt my blood turn to ice. Sophie was describing her own original concept, the one she had developed years ago, the one I had stolen and claimed as mine, and she had no idea that the industry phenomenon James was describing was the same idea she had once shared with me over cheap wine in her living room. I excused myself from the table, claiming I felt unwell. I locked myself in Sophie's bathroom and stared at my reflection, watching my composure crumble. It was only a matter of time now. James was too smart not to connect the dots eventually. He would do his research, find out who was credited with developing emotional mapping, and realize that his sister's best friend had built her career on stolen genius. I thought about coming clean that night. I thought about walking back to that dinner table and confessing everything, the theft, the affair, the years of lies. But I was too much of a coward. I convinced myself that I could manage the situation, that I could stay ahead of any investigation, that James might never make the connection. That was my pattern, you see. When faced with the choice between honesty and self-preservation, I always chose myself, every single time. The wedding was approaching, and my dual betrayal was about to reach its crescendo. Daniel had been growing more reckless in our affair, texting me at inappropriate times, showing up at my flat unannounced, taking risks that made discovery increasingly likely. I asked him what would happen if Sophie found out. He laughed and said she never would. He said Sophie was too trusting, too naive, too in love with the idea of their perfect life to ever suspect the truth. The casual cruelty with which he dismissed her broke something in me. I realized in that moment that Daniel did not love me any more than he loved Sophie. We were both pieces in a game he was playing for his own entertainment. The man I had betrayed my best friend for was not worth either of us. But that realization came too late to matter. The wheels were already in motion. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sophie called me in tears. She had found messages on Daniel's phone. Not messages from me, surprisingly. Messages from another woman entirely. A woman named Claire who worked at Daniel's company. Sophie was devastated, confused, questioning everything she thought she knew about her relationship. I rushed to her side, playing the role of supportive best friend, while my mind raced through the implications. If Sophie was investigating Daniel's phone, she might eventually find evidence of our affair as well. I needed to distance myself, to cover my tracks, to protect the lie I had built my life upon. But I also felt something unexpected. I felt relieved, not for Sophie, but for myself. If Daniel's infidelity with Claire destroyed the wedding, I would never have to watch my best friend marry the man I had been sleeping with. I would never have to stand beside her at the altar and pretend to celebrate a union I had already defiled. It was a selfish relief, the kind that should have disgusted me, and it did, but not enough to change anything. Sophie confronted Daniel, and he denied everything. He explained away the messages, gaslit her into believing she had misunderstood, turned her own insecurities against her until she apologized for accusing him. I watched this manipulation happen in real time, saw Daniel work his dark magic on the woman who loved him, and said nothing. I could have exposed him. I could have confirmed Sophie's suspicions and freed her from a man who would never be faithful, but doing so would have required revealing my own role in the betrayal, and I was not brave enough for that. So I stayed silent. I let Sophie believe Daniel's lies. I let her walk toward a marriage built on deception because protecting my secret mattered more to me than protecting my friend. That is who I was. That is the person years of compromised choices had made me become. The wedding happened on a beautiful June afternoon. Sophie was radiant. Daniel was charming. I was the maid of honor, standing at the altar, holding Sophie's bouquet, watching her exchange vows with the man who had spent 2 years in my bed. During the ceremony, Daniel caught my eye and gave me a small, knowing smile. That smile contained everything wrong with both of us. It was conspiratorial, dismissive, arrogant. It said that we were getting away with it, that Sophie would never know, that we had won some twisted game she did not even know she was playing. I smiled back, not because I wanted to, but because I had been wearing masks for so long that I no longer knew how to take them off. The first year of Sophie's marriage was difficult for me in ways I did not expect. I had assumed that once she was married, Daniel would end our affair. I had assumed, perhaps naively, that he would choose commitment to his wife over the thrill of deception. But I was wrong. Daniel continued to pursue me with the same intensity he always had, perhaps even more so now that the stakes were higher. There was something about the forbidden nature of it that excited him, I realized. The risk of being caught was part of the appeal. For Daniel, Sophie and I were not people. We were sources of stimulation, amusement, power. He enjoyed the game more than he cared about either player. I should have ended it then. I should have walked away and tried to salvage whatever was left of my soul. But I was addicted to the validation Daniel provided, addicted to feeling desired, addicted to the twisted intimacy we shared. So I stayed. I kept meeting him in secret. I kept lying to Sophie. I kept digging my own grave one shovel of deception at a time. Meanwhile, James Brennan was quietly conducting his research. I did not know it at the time, but Sophie had mentioned emotional mapping to him again after the dinner party, sharing more details about her original concept. James had looked into the history of the technology, tracked its development, and discovered that I was credited as its creator. He did not confront me or Sophie immediately. Instead, he gathered evidence, building a case with the methodical precision of someone who had spent years analyzing complex financial data. He found records of my conversation with Gregory Hartwell at the conference, where I had pitched Sophie's idea as my own. He found internal documents from Hartwell and Associates that documented the timeline of the concept's development. He even found an old email I had sent to a colleague bragging about how I had come up with this brilliant idea and how it was going to make my career. James assembled all of this evidence into a damning portfolio, and then he waited. He wanted to be absolutely certain before he destroyed his sister's friendship with me. He wanted to make sure Sophie would believe him when he finally revealed the truth. The second year of Sophie's marriage brought new complications. She confided in me that she and Daniel were having difficulties. He was distant, she said, secretive. She felt like he was hiding something from her, but she could not put her finger on what. I listened to her concerns with practiced sympathy, offering advice, suggesting couples therapy, all while knowing exactly what Daniel was hiding. Me. He was hiding me. And not just me, I suspected. Daniel was likely juggling multiple affairs by this point, addicted to the thrill of deception in a way that would eventually be his undoing. Sophie deserved so much better than the life she was living. She deserved honesty, faithfulness, respect, and I was one of the primary reasons she was not receiving any of those things. The guilt was eating me alive by this point. I had started having panic attacks, waking in the night drenched in sweat, unable to shake the feeling that everything was about to collapse, because it was. I just did not know how close the collapse was. The unraveling began on a Wednesday evening in late autumn. I remember the date exactly because it was the night my entire world changed. I was at home, working on a presentation for an important client meeting, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something compelled me to answer. The voice on the other end was familiar but unexpected. It was Rachel Thornton, a colleague at Hartwell and Associates who had always viewed me as competition. Rachel and I had maintained a civil professional relationship, but there was no warmth between us. She was calling to inform me that Gregory Hartwell had received an anonymous letter. The letter contained detailed allegations that I had stolen the emotional mapping concept from another marketing professional. It included names, dates, and specific details that could only have come from someone with inside knowledge. Gregory was furious, Rachel told me with barely concealed satisfaction. He was launching an internal investigation. He wanted to meet with me first thing in the morning. I did not sleep that night. I paced my flat for hours, trying to figure out who had sent the letter, trying to construct a defense that might save my career. My first thought was James. He had the information and the motive to expose me, but the letter had been anonymous, and James did not seem like the type to hide behind anonymity. He would want to confront me directly, to see the consequences of his actions. Besides, the letter had been sent to my employer, not to Sophie. If James wanted to destroy me, he would have told Sophie first. That was the wound that would hurt the most. So who else knew? Who else had access to the truth about emotional mapping's origins? The answer came to me around 4 in the morning, and it made my blood run cold. Daniel. Daniel knew everything. I had told him about stealing Sophie's idea during one of our many intimate conversations. I had trusted him with my darkest secret because I thought he was in too deep to betray me. But Daniel was not loyal to anyone but himself, and if he had decided to destroy me for some reason, he had all the ammunition he needed. The meeting with Gregory Hartwell was every bit as brutal as I had anticipated. He confronted me with the allegations, demanded an explanation, gave me an opportunity to defend myself. I tried to lie, to dismiss the claims as baseless professional jealousy, to point to my track record of innovation and success. But Gregory was not stupid. He had built his empire by reading people, and he could see the guilt written across my face. He told me that he was suspending me pending the outcome of the investigation. If the allegations were proven true, I would be terminated immediately, and he would consider legal action for fraud. I walked out of that meeting knowing my career was over. Everything I had built, every success I had achieved, every accolade I had received was about to turn to ash. And the worst part was that I deserved it. Every bit of what was coming I had brought upon myself. I tried to contact Daniel that afternoon, desperate to understand if he was behind the anonymous letter. He did not answer my calls or respond to my messages. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Daniel had decided I was a liability, and he was cutting me loose. The man I had betrayed my best friend for was now betraying me with the same casual cruelty he showed everyone in his life. I was not special. I had never been special. I was just another piece he was willing to sacrifice when it no longer served his interests. The irony of that realization was not lost on me. I had done to Sophie exactly what Daniel was now doing to me. I had used her, lied to her, discarded her needs when they conflicted with my own. Karma was showing me exactly how that felt, and it was unbearable. 3 days after my suspension, Sophie called me. Her voice was different than I had ever heard it, cold, controlled, utterly without warmth. She told me that James had come to see her. He had shown her the evidence he had gathered about emotional mapping. He had explained how I had stolen her concept, built my career on her brilliance, and never said a word. Sophie asked me if it was true. Just those 5 words. Is it true, Megan? I could have denied it. I could have tried to explain, to justify, to minimize, but I was so tired. Tired of lying, tired of pretending, tired of being someone I hated, So I told her the truth. I said, "Yes, Sophie, it is true. I stole your idea. I am so sorry." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Sophie spoke again, her voice cracked for the first time. She said she needed time to process. She said she could not talk to me right now. She said goodbye and hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after that call, knowing that I had just lost the most important friendship of my life and knowing that I had no one to blame but myself. But the exposure of my professional betrayal was only the beginning. Sophie started digging into other aspects of our shared history, looking for more lies, more deceptions, more evidence that the friend she had trusted was not who she appeared to be. And she found it. She found evidence of my affair with Daniel. It came from an unexpected source. Claire, the woman whose messages Sophie had discovered before her wedding, had reached out to Sophie after learning about the dissolution of our friendship. Claire was hurt and angry about her own involvement with Daniel, and she wanted to warn Sophie about the kind of man she had married. During their conversation, Claire mentioned that she was not the only other woman in Daniel's life. She told Sophie to look more carefully at the people closest to her. Sophie confronted Daniel that night, and he confessed to everything. He told her about our 2-year affair, about the secret meetings, about the lies we had both constructed to keep her in the dark. He told her without remorse, without shame, as if it were simply information she needed to have. Daniel did not care about Sophie's pain. He never had. The call I received from Sophie the following morning is seared into my memory. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. She asked me why. Why had I done this to her? Why had I stolen from her, lied to her, slept with the man she loved? What had she ever done to deserve this kind of betrayal from someone she had trusted completely? I did not have answers that made any sense. I told her about my mother's influence, about my own insecurities, about the dark parts of myself that I had never been able to control, but none of it was enough. There was no explanation that could justify what I had done. There was no excuse that could heal the wounds I had inflicted. Sophie told me that she never wanted to see me again. She said that I was dead to her, that our friendship had been a lie, that she wished she had never met me. Then she hung up, and I knew that the person I had been for the past 7 years was finally receiving the judgment she deserved. The consequences came swiftly after that. Hartwell and Associates terminated my employment and announced that they were crediting Sophie Brennan as the original creator of the emotional mapping concept. They offered her a substantial settlement and a consulting position, attempting to make amends for the company's role in benefiting from stolen intellectual property. Sophie accepted the settlement but declined the position. She did not want anything that connected her to me. She filed for divorce from Daniel, citing his infidelity and his betrayal of their marriage vows. Daniel did not contest it. He moved on to his next conquest without looking back, leaving a trail of broken women in his wake. My professional reputation was destroyed. No one in the industry would touch me. I went from being a rising star to being a cautionary tale, the woman who had built her career on lies and lost everything when the truth emerged. My mother was furious when she learned what had happened, not because I had done something wrong, but because I had been caught. She accused me of being careless, of not covering my tracks properly, of embarrassing our family with my failure. That conversation was the final push I needed to see my mother clearly for the first time. I realized that she had never loved me. She had loved what I could achieve, what I could become, what I could add to her social standing. I had spent my entire life trying to earn the approval of a woman who was incapable of genuine love, and in that pursuit I had become just like her, cold, calculating, willing to use anyone to get ahead. The recognition of that truth was devastating, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my life, I understood the roots of my own cruelty, and understanding was the first step toward change. I spent months in therapy after the exposure. I needed professional help to understand how I had become someone capable of such sustained deception. My therapist helped me trace the patterns of behavior that had led me to where I was, the perfectionism instilled by my mother, the fear of failure that drove me to cut corners ethically, the low self-worth that made me desperate for validation, even from sources as toxic as Daniel. I learned that I had been operating from a place of profound insecurity my entire adult life. I had believed deep down that I was not good enough to succeed on my own merits. That belief had made me willing to steal, to lie, to betray. Changing those core beliefs was the work of years, not months. But I committed to it. For the first time in my life, I was determined to become someone I could respect. Sophie did not respond to my letters or calls. I sent her written apologies regularly for the first year after the exposure. Long, detailed letters, taking responsibility for my actions, explaining my therapy, expressing my genuine remorse. She never replied. I understood her silence. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness. Some trust, once broken, can never be repaired. I had stolen her idea and built a career on it. I had slept with her husband and watched her marry him, knowing what I had done. I had smiled at her, hugged her, promised her forever while lying to her face for years. There was no coming back from that. The best I could hope for was to become a better person going forward, even if Sophie never witnessed that transformation. 3 years after the exposure, I received an unexpected message. It was from James Brennan. He wrote to tell me that Sophie was doing well. She had started her own marketing consultancy using the settlement money from Hartwell and Associates. She was dating a kind man who treated her the way she deserved to be treated. She was happy, or at least as happy as someone could be after what she had been through. James also told me that Sophie had read my letters. All of them. She was not ready to respond, and she might never be, but she appreciated my accountability and my efforts to change. James said he was writing to me because he believed in redemption. He believed that people could grow and evolve, could become better versions of themselves. He was not forgiving me on Sophie's behalf. That was not his place, but he was offering me something I desperately needed. Hope. Hope that the work I was doing mattered. Hope that the person I was becoming was worth something. Hope that even after the worst betrayal, transformation was possible. I rebuilt my life slowly, from the ground up. I could not work in marketing anymore. That industry was close to me, and rightfully so. I retrained as a counselor, focusing on helping others navigate ethical dilemmas and relationship conflicts. I was not qualified to tell anyone how to live a perfect life, but I was exceptionally qualified to share what happens when you make the wrong choices, when you prioritize ambition over integrity, when you sacrifice the people who love you for short-term gain. I became a walking cautionary tale, and I used that experience to help others avoid the path I had walked. It was not the career I had dreamed of, but it was honest work, and after years of building my life on lies, honesty was the most valuable thing I could offer. 5 years after the exposure, I received a letter from Sophie. Just a few lines, handwritten on plain paper. She wrote that she forgave me, not for my sake, but for hers. She wrote that carrying the anger and hurt had become a burden she no longer wanted to bear. She wrote that she hoped I was doing well and that I had found peace. She did not suggest rebuilding our friendship. She did not offer to see me or talk to me, but she released me from the debt I felt I owed her. She released both of us from the weight of what I had done. I cried for hours after reading that letter, not because I was sad, because I was grateful. Grateful that Sophie's generous heart had somehow survived what I had put it through. Grateful that she had found the strength to forgive, even if she could not forget. Grateful that the story of our friendship, despite its tragic middle chapters, had ended with grace. I am 34 years old now, and I am finally becoming the person I should have been all along. It has taken years of hard work, painful self-examination, and consistent effort to change my deepest patterns. I do not lie anymore about anything, ever. The cost of deception is too high, and I have paid it in full. I do not compete with others for validation or status. I know now that my worth is not determined by external achievements. I do not pursue relationships that are forbidden or inappropriate. I have learned that genuine connection requires honesty, and honesty requires courage I am still developing. I am not perfect. I still have days when the old impulses rise up, when I am tempted to take shortcuts or tell convenient lies. But I recognize those impulses now. I name them, I examine them, and I choose differently. Every day is a new opportunity to be the person Sophie deserved as a friend. Even though I can never be that person to her, I can be that person to everyone else in my life. Daniel's story ended differently than mine. He continued his pattern of deception and manipulation with subsequent partners, never learning, never growing, never changing. Last I heard, he was facing legal action from multiple women he had defrauded emotionally and financially. His business had failed, his reputation was in ruins, and he had become a cautionary tale even more dramatic than my own. I take no pleasure in his downfall. I was complicit in his worst behavior, and I have no moral high ground from which to judge him, but I do see in his trajectory the path I would have followed if I had not been forced to confront my own actions. Being exposed was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. It was also the best thing. It broke the cycle of deception that would have consumed my entire life if it had been allowed to continue. My mother passed away 2 years ago. We were not close at the end. I had established boundaries with her that she could not accept, and our relationship had dwindled to occasional phone calls filled with tension and disappointment. At the funeral, I looked at the woman who had shaped me in so many destructive ways and felt only sadness. Sadness for the love she had never been able to give. Sadness for the daughter she had never been able to see clearly. Sadness for the wasted potential of what our relationship could have been. I forgave her that day, standing beside her grave, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because carrying anger toward the dead serves no one. My mother had done the best she could with the tools she had. Those tools were insufficient, but they were all she had. Understanding that allowed me to let go of the resentment that had shaped so much of my life. I share this story now because I believe in the power of confession. I believe that naming our worst actions, taking full responsibility for them, and committing publicly to change can have a transformative effect. I was a betrayer. I was a thief. I was a liar. I was someone who valued my own advancement over the well-being of the people who loved me most. Those facts are part of my history, and they will never change, but they are not the end of my story. The end of my story is still being written, and with every day that I choose honesty over deception, with every relationship I build on truth rather than manipulation, with every person I help avoid the mistakes I made, I am adding new chapters that honor the lessons I learned through suffering. If you are listening to this and you are keeping a secret that is eating you alive, I want you to know that the truth will find a way out eventually. It always does. You can control how it emerges, or you can let it explode in the worst possible way at the worst possible time. I chose the latter, and the devastation was immense. But if I had chosen the former, if I had confessed my sins before they were exposed, the outcome might have been different. Sophie might have been able to forgive me sooner. Our friendship might have had a chance of surviving. The damage might have been contained rather than catastrophic. I cannot change what happened, but I can share what I learned. The truth is not your enemy. It is the only foundation on which anything lasting can be built. Lies are quicksand. They might hold you up for a while, but eventually they will swallow you whole. Sophie Brennan is happy now. She has built a successful business, found a loving partner, created a life that reflects her beautiful spirit. I had no part in any of that. I was the obstacle she had to overcome, not the friend who walked beside her. That is the consequence of my choices. I live with it every day. But I also take comfort in knowing that Sophie's story has a happy ending despite what I did to her. The brightness of her spirit was not extinguished by my betrayal. She emerged from the darkness stronger than before, more discerning, more protective of her generous heart. In a way, I helped make her who she is today. Not intentionally, not through any virtue of my own, but the fire I put her through forged something unbreakable. If there is any redemption in my story, it is that. My name is Megan Hayes. I cheated my best friend in every way a person can be cheated. I stole her idea. I stole her partner. I stole years of her life that should have been built on truth rather than lies. I kept those secrets buried for 7 years, watching them poison everything they touched. And when the truth finally emerged, I lost everything I had built on that foundation of deception. But in losing everything, I found something I had never had before. I found myself, the real me, stripped of pretense and ambition and desperate striving for validation. The real me, imperfect and flawed and capable of terrible things, but also capable of change. The real me, who wakes up every morning determined to be better than she was the day before. That is who I am now. That is who I choose to be. And that, in the end, is the only thing any of us can control. The story of my betrayal is over. The story of my redemption continues. I do not know where it will lead or what the final chapters will contain. But I know that I will face whatever comes with honesty, accountability, and the hard-won wisdom of someone who learned the cost of lies the most painful way possible. Sophie forgave me. I am still learning to forgive myself. But every day brings me closer to that peace. Every day brings me closer to becoming someone worthy of the forgiveness I have received. And every day I am grateful for the second chance I was given when my secrets were finally brought into the light. This is my confession. This is my truth. And this is my promise to live differently from this day forward. Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding. And if my story helps even one person choose honesty over deception, choose integrity over ambition, choose the people they love over the things they want, then perhaps some good can come from all the harm I caused. That is my hope. That is my prayer. That is the only redemption I dare to ask for.